A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
As I said earlier, the US presidential debate occurred on Friday, our time, and it is big news, and I want us to cover it today. I want us to talk about it, and we have the one and only Tony Davenport, who works in our newsroom here at Vision. And if you don't know Tony's background, Tony has worked as a journalist for more years than he cares to remember. He's worked for Reuters. He was also the executive producer at Channel 7 and Channel 10. And Tony found a faith later in life. He saw the light. He now works in Christian media. And I've asked Tony to join me in the studio today. Now, we're going to open up the talk lines for your thoughts as well. Do you think the US presidential election is even important to us? Do you really care who wins that election? Does it matter to you, or does it bother you? Are you invested, or you just don't really pay any attention to it? So, Tony, as I said, we had Donald Trump debating Joe Biden, who is the sitting incumbent president. And, what was your initial reaction to that?
Well, I listened to the whole lot, and I didn't think Biden did hugely badly, because he's often performed not so well in the past. He's often had little bumbling moments. And the interesting thing is that the next day he went on a campaign rally and came out firing, really getting stuck into Donald Trump and being on all four cylinders. What I think happened is that the minders of the Democrat Party probably got into his head and overloaded his mind with answers to too many questions and smart lines to say, and he probably just got overwhelmed by that. His mind was so cluttered. But then again, he's a leader of the free world, and so he should be able to handle that, and that's where the age thing comes into prominence and debate.
Yeah, well, he's actually not that much different in age to Donald Trump, but he definitely doesn't seem to be mentally capable of running the free world. And I think there's a recent survey, I think over 70% of Americans are now saying they don't think that he's mentally capable of actually running the country anymore. So this is a big issue, isn't it, for the Democrats?
Oh, it's huge. The actual poll says 72% of registered voters believe he does not have the mental and cognitive health to serve as president. And that's a big increase from about 65% who said the same in a poll earlier this year. But at the same time, 49% of people polled don't believe Donald Trump is young enough to be president either. They think he's too old. But what's particularly alarming for the Democrat Party is that 45% of registered Democrats believe he should step aside. And just in the last few hours, the New York Times editorial board has decreed that he should stand down. And that could make an impact on the president and his family, who are currently meeting in Camp David, having big discussions on whether they're going to go ahead with his campaign. And if we don't hear in the next couple of days, he probably will continue. But we could have an announcement coming up in the next 24 hours or so if Joe Biden decides to stand down. He will be under pressure, but ultimately it's his decision. At the same time, the Democrat Party has to be scrambling to find a plan B. Who is going to be their candidate if Biden does stand down? And that, we just don't know.
Yeah, there's so much unknown in there. And I wanted to put it out to our listeners today. The talk lines are open now. Do you have an opinion on this? Do you care who wins the US presidential election? Do you think it matters to Australia? And as a Christian, if you're a Christian, does it matter to you whether or not it's one of the Democrat leaders, or do you think Donald Trump actually is someone that God wants to use to help America? I don't know if you remember, Tony, but when Trump got elected the first time, he was the 45th US president. And many Christians were saying that Isaiah chapter 45, which prophesies about King Cyrus, God using him to fulfill his purposes, many people saw Trump as a person that God wanted to use to reform America and, drain the swamp and everything else. And a lot of Christians in Australia didn't understand that. They thought, well, how can a guy who obviously has not lived a godly life his whole life be used of God? But if you look at King Cyrus, he was not a Jewish king either. He was a king from another nation. And yet God said, I'm going to use you, Cyrus, to bring in my purposes. So it is a very, very interesting time in US history, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And what Trump did during that first term that was of a tremendous benefit to Christians was that he got a conservative-dominated Supreme Court. And that has swung a lot of Christian issues to the Christian side, like the Roe versus Wade, the overturning of that by the Supreme Court was that was a major tremor through the American culture. And that did really well. At the same time, he was a strong supporter of Israel because he moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, one of the few countries in the world to do that. So he's very much for Christian values, and that's where I think a lot of his support comes from. Christians are supporting him because he is by far the best candidate for Christians. I'm just doing a few stories today about some of the states are really getting confident that Trump's going to win. Some of the southern states, should I say, conservative Republican states, they are getting very confident that Trump is going to win. Like Tennessee is this month legally decreed through a bill in its legislature that it will be a month of prayer and fasting and repentance in Tennessee to try and cure the ills of all the problems that a state has, whether it be homicide rates, it could be a lot of drink driving, it could be drug addiction, it could be human trafficking, it could be 9,000 children in foster care, for example. But Tennessee has decreed that humans can't solve this. They need some divine intervention. So it's appealed to the legislature has appealed to all Christian Tennesseans, and there's a lot of them, because that's the centre of contemporary Christian music and Christian publishing, and the biggest Protestant church, which is the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's a strongly Christian state, and so there's a lot of Christians who are going to be praying, fasting, and repenting there this month.
That's amazing. I hadn't heard that. Well, we've got a call already, and Graham from Bunbury has joined us on the line today. Are you there, Graham?
Yes, Andrew, good morning.
How are you, mate? What's your thoughts or opinions on this?
Just that, I mean, my understanding is that Trump has done quite a lot for America in the last few years, and he seems to be pushing not just a Christian agenda, but, I think he's the right guy for the job. But I kind of thought he was going to jail, so I'm surprised that he's still running. Is that, like, in the wings, or what happened there?
Well, I'm going to ask our journalistic expert, Tony Davenport, to explain that. He's definitely been tried. He's been found guilty in a New York court. But, Tony, does that really mean that Trump has to go to jail?
No. He probably won't go to jail. One, it's politically... It's very bad if the Democrats send him to jail, because one of the things that have backfired for him is that by charging him with all these offences, like the ones that he was charged with were generally regarded as a misdemeanour, and most courts didn't want to prosecute him. And then there was a New York guy who campaigned that he will prosecute against Trump. He became the district attorney, and away they went. But most other people didn't want to prosecute him. These charges on which he was charged were generally not regarded as serious charges. And all the publicity that Trump has had through the appearances in court have only worked to strengthen his supporters. So it might not have gained a lot of extra supporters, but it certainly solidified his base.
Yeah, and so that was a New York court, Graham. It wasn't a federal court, and it was never going to end in a jail sentence, but it became great ammunition for the Democrat-leaning media in America to try and really discredit Trump, and I think that's what that court case was all about. But have you got any other thoughts or questions about Donald Trump or Joe Biden today, Graham?
No, just the parallels between that and Jesus going to Pilate, I thought was almost hilarious, but anyway.
Well, you're right. I mean, in many ways, he was a bit like, I'm not saying that, don't quote me on this, he wasn't like Jesus in his morals, but his story was very similar to Jesus, because the establishment rejected Jesus. When he came along, he turned up saying, hey guys, I actually know the way now, and all of the religious leaders who'd been established for hundreds of years in their positions, they rejected him. They dismissed him, they mocked him, they criticised him, they got to the point they even murdered him. but they couldn't stop him. And let's be honest, I mean, before that election that Trump won, the whole world's media ganged up on him, the establishment ganged up on him, and he somehow survived and won that election. And it was a little bit like a Bible story, wasn't it, Graham?
Yep. Love your work, guys. Have a super day. Thank you.
You too, Graham. God bless. And anyone else today, you want to join this conversation, tell us your thoughts. Does it even matter what happens in the US election, or can Australia just pretend that America doesn't affect us, that we can just do whatever we want without America's help or assistance? But Tony, you also mentioned Israel, that Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. What do you think might happen if Trump becomes president again in the context of the Israel versus Hamas and Hezbollah war?
I think he will support Israel. I can't say anything more than that because it's unclear. He hasn't been over vocal about exactly what his policy is going to be. But in the past, from his first term, we saw that he was a strong supporter of Israel. Now, that doesn't mean he'll go to war for Israel. He will attack Iran or something like that. It will be that he supports Israel. Exactly how that manifests itself, we've yet to see.
Yeah, I think you're right there. That's a good answer. And I mean, because traditionally, I mean, America and Israel were very close allies. Israel relied on America a lot for their technology and their armaments. And I mean, you've only got to watch those demonstrations in countries like Iran where they say, you know, America's the great Satan and Israel is the little Satan. They're always viewed as being one and the same. But I think you're right. I think he will definitely support Israel. Now, we've got another call. I want to go to this next caller, and it's Vince from Brisbane. Vince, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Andrew. Look, I want to say, first of all, I think it matters monumentally to Australia and the entire world who wins that election. And, of course, naturally, I do not want Biden winning it on a whole range of, issues. He was the one pushing the jab mandates. They're the ones pushing the LGBTIQ. They were the ones also condoning all the 2020, summer riots that ran, for like 120 days straight. But look, I doubt even if Biden's really running the country, I think it's Obama. And the other thing, too, is, and I researched deeply, I even devoted a chapter in my book to what happened in America in 2020-21. This is controversial, but I honestly believe in my entire heart of hearts, Biden is a fraudulently elected president. I've got absolutely no doubt about that, especially with the video that happened in Farm Arena in Fulton County, Georgia, at 10:30 on the election night.
Yeah. So can I just ask you though, Vince, as a Christian, why do you want Trump to win and not Biden? Just summarise that.
I can summarise it. I'll say, but out from the Christian, well, Biden is absolutely 100% pro-abortion, even though he claims to be a practicing Catholic. That'd be like one of the first things. They are pushing the transgender. I mean, that's as anti-Christian as you can possibly get. They're also not. They're definitely not for school choice as well in America. They really want all their children, to go there through the public school system. And the schools utterly have been taken over with this cultural neo-Marxist ideology. I mean, I don't see anything in the Democratic platform that's anything to me that I can consider remotely Christian.
Yep. Okay.
And
so
the leaking southern border is destroying America too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but let's pretend a Christian, and we had a really good caller about this on Friday because we had an American guest on, and a lady rang with a very sincere question. Well, how can you vote for Trump when he's an ungodly man? Like, what's your response to that, Vince? How can you support or want Trump to win when there's aspects of his life which don't appear to be very moral or godly?
I think the thing is, we are all flawed individuals, you see, and I think if you're coming from a Christian aspect, and also from an anti-globalist aspect, and the preservation of our freedom of rights, our fundamental right, freedom of religion. See, I don't see Trump as a threat to that, right? It's not that we have to actually invite him home for dinner. You've got to look at who is better for the country. The agenda of the Democrat Party at the moment, I see one that's wholly, utterly devoted to destroying Christianity. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate globalist agenda as well. So you're not going to. I mean, that's what it's come down to. It's come down now to between Biden and Trump.
Yep.
I think there's really no other candidate. And also the other thing, like I said, with the leaking southern border, everything points to me, telling me that the Democrat Party, that they are out to destroy America and actually the whole Western civilization in general. Yep. Which I mean, the foundations of which were our Christian values.
Absolutely. Tony, have you got a response to this as well? Just hang on a second.
I just think that the main concern, or one of the biggest concerns for Australians, is that we're very much under America's wing. If we've had to support them in World War II, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and let's say China attacked Taiwan in the next few years, we would be obliged to support America, and that's a pretty chilling thought.
Yeah, it is. But Vince, you've articulated your arguments very well, and I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today. Awesome, mate. Well, thanks for the call, Vince. Always welcome to call us back again later as well.
Okay then, Andrew.
See you, mate. See ya.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, I think he articulated his arguments pretty well there, Tony, because we're dealing with two failed human beings. I just want to say too, after the National News Bulletin, in about 11 minutes' time, we have a very special conversation with Chloe Cole. She came into the studio earlier today. She had other commitments, and she told her story, Tony, about how she, as a 13-year-old girl, was really encouraged by medical professionals in California to undergo gender change, and she went through that change. And a couple of years later realised this was a mistake, and she transitioned back, and just the trauma and the pain she suffered. So I really encourage our listeners to hang out for that one. That's just after the National News Bulletin. But let's get back to this US presidential election, Tony. It just feels like everything in America is really building up right now, isn't it, to this election in November? And this is big, isn't it?
It is big. And while you're talking about the transgender operation in California, one of the favourites to take over as Biden's, let's say Biden drops out, if one of the favourites to take over is the governor of California, who's brought in all these very left-wing policies on schools, LGBT ideology in schools, and transgender operations for children and things like that. He is a very presentable candidate, but his policies are appalling. And the one thing about that debate between Biden and Trump, there was nothing about policy. It was all just trading barbs on, he said, immigration, on abortion, on even their golf games. They just snide remarks at each other. And here's, I'm going to give you a couple of summaries of what some more professional observers wrote. Here's what the Associated Press wrote. Presidential debates are often scored on style and impression. Well, nearly always, I would say. And Trump was confident and composed, even as he steamrolled facts on immigration and abortion with false assertions, conspicuous exaggerations, and empty superlatives. But Biden was often halting, his voice raspy. Even when he had the facts on his side, he had difficulty finishing his arguments and marshalling his attacks. And that's why he's in trouble.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I watched it expecting Biden to be worse. I was actually amazed how well he did hear the questions and answer the questions, and I thought he performed pretty well. But it does look like the Democrat Party and the mainstream media in America are now nervous about Biden, aren't they, after that debate, and they want something to change.
Absolutely, because I was like you. I thought, well, it's not too bad because this is Biden. He's done this for the last 2 years, and but it's almost like the pile-on by the mainstream media as soon as the debate was over was quite surprising. It was overwhelming. It's like it's almost been orchestrated.
Yeah, okay. Well, that lends it. There's so many potential and actual conspiracy theories, isn't there, surrounding the US right now and these US elections. But yeah, I don't know if it's orchestrated or not, but I think what the problem is, the mainstream media in America have spent the last 2 years telling Americans he's good, he's coherent, he knows what he's doing, he's a great president, he can do another 4 years. And maybe, Tony, that debate on Friday just made everyone realise, you know what, he's not good. And another 4 years of this, we don't know what's going to happen. Because let's be honest, I mean, right now the world's in crisis. We've got a war in Ukraine. We've got a war in Israel between Hamas and Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies. There seems to be cost of living crisis in America. Like, there's some real challenges facing the world and America right now, isn't it? We need a leader.
Oh, absolutely, because, you've got the Putin trying to make friends with Kim Jong-un. That's terrifying because they're potential maniacs, basically. So it's a really worrying situation. We need a strong but a very controlled leader in the White House.
Yeah, look, and I'll be fair, objectively, I thought Trump was fairly controlled and composed in that particular debate. He didn't answer many questions, like you said, with real facts or policies, and it felt like he was just defending himself the whole time, which probably is an insight into his personality. He's obviously full of ego. Let's be honest, you don't become a self-made billionaire without a very healthy ego, and I think that was on display. But the interesting thing, Tony, and this is what a lot of Australians and British don't understand, is that Americans are more inclined to, I think, follow an egotistical leader than we are. The whole presidential concept is bigger in America. We tear down the tall poppies in Australia. The Americans build them up. And I don't think his ego and just he's so bombastic and so confident. I don't think that works against him in America.
Oh, it doesn't. And the thing is, America put up a lot of other alternative Republican candidates. They got nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Trump had his base from his first term, and that base has not left him, and it's probably growing gradually now, probably a little bit more since last week's debate, and I think that he's going to be the Republican candidate, and very well could be the president.
Yeah, it's looking that way. But you mentioned some Christian aspects to this story as well. And I didn't know about the fact that state of Tennessee is declaring a time of prayer and fasting. That is so good, isn't it? But there's other things in southern states, isn't there?
Absolutely, because I think they're getting very confident that Trump could be their man and they won't get shut down by the courts. In Louisiana, they are making the 10 Commandments be displayed in every classroom in the state. In every public school. It's caused a bit of a furor, but a lot of Christians in Louisiana, and they are supporting it. So that is good. Now, Oklahoma's gone one step further. They have just decreed that the Bible must be used in every classroom in the in the state. Every public classroom, every classroom must have a Bible, and that must be worked into all lessons. Now, how that works in mathematics, I'm not quite sure, but for things like history and stuff like that, they will teach about the Christian foundings of America, which probably aren't getting taught that much in the more woke schools, and the state of Oklahoma, they elect their head of education, what he's called the superintendent of public instruction, and his name is Ryan Walters, and he got elected on a campaign against all woke ideology in schools, and he's changed things immeasurably. He's allowed prayer in schools. He's allowed even the education department they have what they call foundational values, and they include the acknowledging that there's a creator and acknowledging that there is good and evil, and he's allowed students to go off campus for special religious education. It is really bringing the Bible back into the classroom. And now they've actually passed, well, no, they haven't actually passed a law because they think it's legal to do so. That is still debatable because there is some indication that every separate county or educational district has control over what they teach, but it looks like that may be steamrolled by Ryan Walters.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we've got Oklahoma saying there needs to be a Bible in every classroom. We've got Louisiana saying the 10 Commandments must be on display in every classroom. And we've got Tennessee saying we need to fast and pray as a state. Isn't it amazing, those southern states, how much more Christian they are than the northern states? And this is what many people in Australia don't realise, that a lot of the media comes out of the northern states, doesn't it? Out of LA and
Absolutely.
New York. And yet the southern states are much more Christianised and God-fearing like traditional America was. And that's what we talk about, the culture wars in America. There's a massive culture war, isn't there, between some of these more Christian states and some of these more northern states who are way more non-Christian and woke and have these left-wing agendas.
Absolutely, because in the southern states, a lot of people would watch CBN. Now, CBN is Christian Broadcasting Network set up by Ted Robertson. A lot of people watch that. Never heard of it in Australia, but the mainstream channels all come, as you say, from the liberal centres of New York and Washington, and they try to promote their agenda, which is very much the Democrat agenda. So they make no secret of who they support. But it's very interesting that the New York Times editorial board has told Biden to go.
Yeah, it's very interesting because they're very powerful. But that also explains, doesn't it, too, Tony, why the Australian media is so anti-Trump and so pro-woke often, because we just get our media from those media outlets in America who are left-leaning. So, Tony, really insightful, really interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today and just talking us through that US presidential debate and also what's going on in America. I didn't know about Oklahoma. I didn't know about Tennessee. It's actually really encouraging, isn't it? But Tony Davenport from the Newsroom, I want to thank you for joining us on 2020 Today.
Absolute pleasure, Andrew.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.